sons and daughters.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Aurora Smedley podcast, where I speak with you about what the world needs to hear. And in today's episode, I'm going to be discussing 10 lessons learned from curing my depression. So I think this is going to be a very relevant topic for anyone who is experiencing severe depression or suicidality. I hope that this will be a resource for you and your loved ones, and I can't wait to share this information with you. Before I get into the podcast, I wanted to let you know that I just released a resource called Rock Bottom, which is a course that I created in order to help anyone who is experiencing the lowest of the low in their life and being able to transform that into the greatest personal development, the greatest blessings, the greatest advancement of yourself that you could possibly imagine. So this is from my own experience, recovering from severe depression and suicidality, from breakups, from financial struggles. I debated for quite a while on the price for this. In the past, I have sold this material for $500. I have been encouraged by mentors to sell this material for $3,000, $5,000, but I really wanted to make sure that this material is accessible to anyone who needs it. So this is available as a pay what you want offer on my website, aurorasmedley.com. I want to make sure that you have access to this material so that it can change your life. So without any further ado, let's get into the material for this week, which is, like I said, 10 lessons learned from curing my severe depression. Also, just want to point out that I'm not a mental health professional, but I am a happy person. I am somebody who has experienced severe depression and suicidality. And so this material is from my own experience. By listening to this, you are agreeing not to sue me. Please be responsible for your own life. So let's talk about this. So number one, the first thing is that the opposite of depression is not undepression. A lot of people think that the opposite of depression is just going back to the way things were or getting undepressed. Getting undepressed is not the opposite of depression. Mental health is not the opposite of depression. The opposite of depression is vitality, is happiness, is life, is creation, is enthusiasm. These are the things that are actually going to be the opposite of depression. So instead of looking for mental health, instead of looking for happiness, instead of looking for any of those things, look for the things that light you up. Look for the things that bring you joy. Look for the things that have the spark in it, that have the spark of life, that bring more life, that bring more light into your life. This is the opposite, not being undepressed, not going back to the way that things were, not becoming what you were before. The next thing that I want to point out is that we live in a culture where our mental health is monetized. So happiness is something that comes with a price in our society. We are told that in order to feel better, in order to get better, I have to pay XYZ for therapy. I have to pay XYZ for medications. I have to pay XYZ in order to have whatever. Right? And while it's true that we have obvious, clear material world needs and that we need to pay for these things or we need to find ways to receive these things, but the truth of the matter is that the way that our society is set up, your suffering is monetized by institutions and people and psychiatric medications and pharmaceutical companies. This is not to say that these things can never work, but the actual efficacy of all of these approaches are actually not that great. But even though the objective efficacy is not that high, we are told that that is the thing that we should do. We are told that we should obviously go to therapy, that going to therapy is what grown-ups do, that going to therapy means that you are a responsible adult. So, like I said, this is kind of a monetization of our suffering, and in a way, a monetization of the fact that we no longer have effective social connections. Rather than talking to an elder, rather than talking to your grandmother, rather than sharing what's going on with you with your friends, we have this perception in our society, we have this messaging in our society that we have to pay somebody in order to receive the connection, the understanding, the perspective on what we're going through, because we shouldn't be burdening our friends, our family, our connections with any of that. So the next thing I want to point out is that our society actually has a culture of illness. Our society, at least in America, is not really designed to make you happy, make you fulfilled, make you healthy. Our society is not optimized for human well-being. So because of that, you have to carve out, you need to find a way to carve out a space in a culture that is not really aligned with creating happiness for you. Our culture is not designed in a way to make you feel like you are surrounded by connections, that you are surrounded by love, that you are supported unconditionally. These are not things that our culture really provides for us. Nor is our culture a culture of walking, which is so beneficial for your physical and mental health. Our culture is not a culture of eating whole foods prepared at home. It's a culture of fast foods. It's a culture of high fructose corn syrup. None of these things are beneficial for your physical health, for your mental health, for your social connections and well-being. So because of all of this, you need to understand that all of your mental health experiences, any depression or suicidality that you're feeling, is in the context of a culture that is not really designed to make you happy and healthy. The next thing that I want to point out is that our culture loves science, right? And science is awesome. I am a past life geophysicist. My parents are both very science engineering people. I love science. However, I want to also point out that there are limitations of science with regards to the recovery of your own mental health conditions. The reason why is because science demonstrates averages. It demonstrates probabilities of a certain treatment working on you. It doesn't demonstrate an absolute. So basically, something could work for 99% of people, but if you are the 1% of people that it doesn't work for, then it doesn't matter that it works for 99% of people. So let's say this doesn't exist, but let's say that there is one pill that you can take that works for 99% of people, and you take that pill and it doesn't work for you. You are in the 1% of people that it doesn't work for. Then it means that it with 100% certainty does not work for you. So because of this, you can't go and start denying your own experience relative to the masses. You need to adjust your own recovery process based off of your own lived experience. So this is the intersection of subjectivity and the importance of subjectivity in your own mental health journey, is that you need to constantly measure things against the metric of how do you feel, not does this work for other people? Not what does this expert or that expert or my psychiatrist say? Even if they say that it works for 100% of other people, if it doesn't make you feel better, it doesn't matter, because that thing is not working for you. So you need to find the thing that works for you. Even everything that I say Some of it might work for you, some of it might not. All of it might work for you, none of it might work for you. So because of that, you still need to reference your own inner knowing about your own response to the thing. Are you feeling better? Are you feeling worse? You need to pay attention to how you feel, because how you feel is ultimately the yardstick to determine whether you're getting better or not. The next thing that I want to address is the connection between the mind and the body in healing processes. So the Western perspective typically separates the mind from the body at the neck. And this is already being shown to be a misconception. There's many, many limitations to this way of viewing reality because, for example, most medical issues can be treated with exercise. You need to remember that the brain doesn't end at the brain. The brain is connected to the nervous system, which runs through your entire body. So the shifts that happen in your entire body are going to connect directly through this internal electric wiring to your brain. Moreover, for example, the gut actually produces more serotonin than your brain does. So at this point, it's becoming clear that the body and the overall health of the body is going to affect your mental health more than just looking at your mental health separately from your physical health. These are intertwined things. Another example is that ADHD can be effectively treated by people standing on a balance board, of all things. How would that have to do with mental health, right? Or you can have massive improvements in your mental health by exercising more. Okay, so that is a physical treatment for a quote unquote mental illness. You see, there is an intersection between the mind and the body. These are both very interconnected things. And so trying to separate them out and say that it's only a mental health problem and it's not a physical issue, or it's only a physical issue and it doesn't have any mental thing in it also, is a mistake. Moreover, there's a connection between the mind and the body and the spiritual as well. Oftentimes, things that can't be really resolved on a physical level, on a mental level even, these can be resolved once we address it on a more non-physical, on a more quote-unquote spiritual level. Lesson 6 on things that I've discovered from curing my own depression is that our society is obsessed with hustle and with doing. Our society loves to hustle, loves to do. If you are not exerting enormous amounts of effort, we perceive that as being wrong. Because of this, people think that we have to work really hard at our mental health, that mental health is something that shouldn't arise naturally, that we have to constantly put in tons and tons of effort rather than we just set it and forget it. I believe in set it and forget it mental health. I believe in set it and forget it physical health. Like, I just stick to a program and you do that and you do it for a long time and eventually you get the results that you want. Same thing with mental health. I think that if you have to meditate for 2 hours a day in order to feel okay, then you are probably exerting too much effort. Your mental health should be a default. Your happiness should be a default, not something that you have to constantly prop up by exerting tons of time, energy, and effort. If you have to meditate for 3 hours a day and go to a therapist twice a week and take medications and do all of this stuff in order for you to just feel happy, then there's too much efforting. There's too much you trying to force a result. I believe that happiness should be inherent, that happiness should arise naturally because of the way that you're living your life, not because of some kind of externally imposed effort, forcing, trying to make it work. You know, these kinds of things, that is actually counterproductive in my view to long-term mental well-being and happiness. Lesson 7 is that we live in the matrix. And I think that a lot of people don't really discuss the matrix in relation to mental health. We're like, oh yeah, this is a you problem. And I touched on this earlier in that we don't really have a culture of happiness, but I want to get even more in depth with this as far as it essentially being psychological warfare that is going on, battling for your attention, for your mind, for your approval, for your clicks, for your everything. That basically the digital world that we live in is clawing at your brain, trying to get you to buy, trying to get you to pay attention, trying to get you to like, trying to get you to engage. And the way that it does that is by enraging you, is by telling you that you need something in order to be worthy, that you need to buy a product in order to be pretty enough. You need to buy a product in order to be respected. You need to buy a thing in order to make up for a lack that you have within yourself, rather than seeing that you are complete, that you are whole as you are. Our society has a lot of news that is intended to enrage, that is intended to incite. And because of this, we're in this sea of people being constantly upset, of being polarized, of being turned against each other. None of this is really productive for your emotional well-being. We are essentially bathing in this sea of triggers where our advertising is intended to trigger us in order to get us to engage. And when we engage more, it gets more clicks, it gets boosted by the algorithm, and this pushes that kind of content further to get stuck in front of our faces. I don't think I'm too extreme in saying that there is a certain level of psychological warfare that is going on, battling for your mind and your cash and your attention and your energy and your money. Because of this, you need to be conscientious that all of your mental health, quote unquote, issues are happening in the context of this war going on for your mind. There was a war going on for your minds. There's a song like that, and I'm just totally thinking of that song right now. You need to be conscientious that all of these quote unquote mental health conversations are usually pointing fingers at you, like you need to fix this, you need to get better, you need to get off the couch, you need to whatever. But the thing is that all of our social media and including video games, like these are things used to latch onto our dopamine receptors so that we become addicted to the thing. So because of that, you need to recognize that this is not just a you problem. This is a societal issue. This is you in the context of the society that we live in. If you just took yourself to a different stage, a different scenario, and you moved to the Amazon and lived in a tribe out there, you probably would not feel any level of depression that we do in today's day and age in our society. So let's move on. Lesson number 8. This is that we all have different wiring. This seems kind of obvious, but I think a lot of people don't really discuss this in terms of mental health, that we all have different wiring and different kind of inherent tendencies as far as our own selves. And because of this, we have different vulnerabilities to experiencing quote unquote mental health conditions. A lot of people think that it's mental health problems run in the family, but I think it's more that sensitivity runs in the family or that neurodivergence runs in the family, because everybody has a different body, has different wiring, has different components that we come in with, right? So it's like you're comparing a squirrel and a fish's response to water. If you throw both of them in the ocean, they're going to have a very different response. The fish is going to swim around and be super happy, and the squirrel is going to feel like it's totally drowning, and it's because the squirrel needs to be climbing trees, not jumping in the ocean. You see what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that because of the different psychological wiring that we have different areas of comfort, of expertise, of orientations towards life, and that we need to decide how we're living our life, considering the fact that we may be more or less sensitive than other people, that we may have different wiring, different makeup compared to other people, and that in the context of our own wiring, we need to make decisions based on that. Something that I realized in my own journey is that I'm just way more sensitive than the average person. I feel a lot more emotions than the average person. I seem to look at reality from a very different perspective than the average person. And so maybe everybody else out there is thinking the same things that I do, but I actually don't think that that's the case. I know that I'm sensitive. I know that as a woman, I am going to experience different emotional context over the course of the month. And so because of that, I need to be conscientious of what kinds of things I'm exposing myself to, whether I'm exposing myself to social media, when I'm exposing myself to social media, if I'm more sensitive at that time. And so basically, by being conscientious to all of these things, I've been able to become much more happy and have a much greater sense of well-being because I am creating my life in alignment with who I actually am. Awesome. Lesson number 9 is that trauma is a thing. Specifically, that trauma is kind of like an unprocessed emotion that is stuck in your nervous system. So in order for you to release trauma, because I think people sometimes will try to like relive their trauma over and over again. But the thing is that you can actually release the trauma. You can let go of the trauma, and then the trauma leaves your body. And when you do that, basically, you're processing the emotion, the total depth of the emotion, and the physicality of that emotion at the time of the trauma that you experienced. And so once you process that in its full physicality, then the trauma leaves your body. And when it leaves your body, it's no longer affecting your day-to-day lived experience. So it just leaves. It's gone. And then that thing isn't really like playing a role in your life anymore. If that thing is still kind of a major trigger for you, then it means that you haven't really recovered from it yet. You haven't really released it yet. One resource that I want to point to with regards to trauma is the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That is a really great introduction to the concept. However, I will say that that book is kind of traumatic, and I would put it as like almost like a little negative. That book, reading that book is in its own way a little traumatic because it's talking about all of these really intense traumas that people experience. So I guess I want to point out that that is a very informative resource, but it's not a very pleasant resource. And like I said, I'm going to be writing my own book on depression recovery, and so I'm going to overview some of this in my book once it's published as well. So the next thing that I want to point to, lesson number 10 in all of this, is the consideration for altered states and the non-physical in the recovery from mental health illnesses. Most resources that I've looked at have not really talked about this very much. I'd say that most of the psychiatry or psychology literature doesn't really look at the non-physical or the spiritual in regards to depression recovery. And then most of the spiritual texts don't really discuss the depth of psychological anguish that we currently experience in today's society. But I would say that understanding the non-physical is actually critical to the recovery from mental health ailments, and that the solution to many of these issues can be through the lens of the non-physical. This is something that Carl Jung spoke about. This is something that is totally in the know-how for yogis, for Buddhism, for Kabbalah. These are all kind of under that umbrella. But basically, a lot of the kind of issues with psychiatry, in my view, can be resolved through an assessment of the non-physical and non-physical reality, because there is something on the level of non-physical that is affecting all of these things. This is where altered states of consciousness can be significant for helping people resolve mental illness. I'm sure many of you know that there is so many studies now demonstrating the efficacy of psychedelics on mental health. And I can speak for myself in saying that using psychedelics consciously was significant for me in recovering from severe depression and suicidality. So I've discussed 10 different lessons that I have discovered from curing my own depression. And I hope that in sharing this with you, it has been very beneficial for your own mental health and happiness journey, and for those of your friends and family. And with that, I will leave you until our next podcast, and I look forward to seeing you then.